This is Patricia Windrow at the Cable Easel, bringing you a program of painting and drawing from life. And this is part 2 of a program that I did about the painting of Smith Point Beach. In a very simple composition, I began it. There was not time to finish it, so we're going to wind it up this time. There is no intent to imply that you can do a fine painting in a half an hour, nor even in an hour. But the best that this program can hope to do is to give you some feeling about how you go about it. Simpler compositions are sometimes the most intriguing. Long Island affords many simple compositions. This one, as the last program was able to point out, is a two-line composition, namely the line of the dune running up against the sky and the break of the dune where the beach flattens out, and that's it. But as I said before, at least it's a plan. Instead of just going into a canvas and going from somewhere in the imagination, it's at least a plan. I'm working from a small sketch. Vital for me because I go out and I paint wherever I am, but to carry lots of heavy equipment and lots of big canvases is pointless. So I bring small canvases, little 5 by 12 inch panels, come back to the studio and I enlarge them and make a big deal out of them. So this is the way I want to show you how I try to make a big deal out of a small sketch. It's a question of reduction when you're there and then enlargement when you're in the studio. So it's playing with proportion all the time. I've gotten this far. The dunes are laid out. The sand is around them. Now come the details that are observable only from life. The dunes change. They send down growths of vines and things that run down the sides of the dunes, and they are, I carefully observe these particular patterns because they are so typical of the anatomy of this place. And if you're bothering to be a realist painter, which I am, of course, then you have to be concerned with the anatomy of these places purely for accuracy, and also probably for maybe reference material later on in the century when maybe all this is gone. It's up to us to make sure that we can save it. Up there on the dunes, it isn't just green. There are all sorts of things. There are dark patches where the foliage has either died or it's turned dark because of the season. And I like to pay attention to those details because that's what a realist painter is all about. There are little sticks lying about, which should be done with smaller brush. Here is a small brush. I spoke about it last week. This brush sells for $12.50, but I got it for half price because I just will not do that. I will not pay $12.50 for itty-bitty tiny brush. However, they're vital. They're necessary. You must have them. They're equipment. They're like trying to make eggs without a frying pan. So you have to have these brushes, and for details such as this, the little figure that is up on the hill here, I noticed from my sketch, is also in company with somebody else who's up in the dunes, headed for the building, and that little figure can be put up here almost without any detail, as long as you know that something is up there that appears to be the proportion of a human being. I am interested in seeing people in their environments, and also the living population. On this beach on my sketch, I see that I've got a whole line of of gulls that are facing the sea, all in the same direction, and I put them in my sketch, which of course is going to be very helpful for me as I begin to elaborate on this small sketch. This is the apparently the color of what the sand looks like when it's thrown into a flat light, and it becomes a combination of white, orange, mauve, a touch of cerulean blue. So it's observation that you can count on when you're out there working from life. Also, there is a very soft quality with the blending of colors with sand, and that's one of the reasons that I'm out there when the weather permits and when it's lovely to go out and really do some studies of this remarkable environment. Of course, beaches all over the world are great. We happen to have some of the greatest right here on Long Island, and I've been recording and painting these beaches for nigh on to 30 years. So I do understand their color scheme, and I also do understand their potential danger, that they may be really being misused. So not only am I using this as an object lesson, an example of how to go out and paint these scenes, but also trying to get some awareness going that they must at all costs be taken care of. So we have a little dip in the sand there, casting some shadows, deeper shadows, and then up here we have another sort of a little ridge coming into a depression, which makes it a dark place. All by watching and being careful to be able to work with subtle colors such as this. And subtle colors are the most difficult. The big brassy primary colors are not too hard to handle because they are so seductive in their brilliance. It's the subtle ones that need to have some work done to them. Let me see. Yeah, well, it looks to me like the sand. Well, there's a little dip down here, so I better put some shadow in there and a touch of the growth, which is sap green. I said this the last time, but I best repeat it now for the people who are really watching seriously to see how I do it. This is a combination of sap green, a touch of orange, and a touch of spectrum violet, which is the color that reduces the intensity of greens. And I must say that the intensity of greens is something to be watched out for. You must the sign of the rankest amateur is when the greens are too bright. So. Here we have dunes, people, growth, greens, and so on, and we have the beach has now flattened out, but then it's coming towards the foreground. We must now begin to make it come towards you. The beach has now become clean once again, or sort of clean. Let me see, I see from my sketch that I must put some more in this foreground here, some more in this middle ground. So just let me hold this canvas. It seems to be precariously jumping about. This is the flattened area of the beach, which is going to be the background, ready to receive that little population of gulls that have gathered on the beach and are all facing the water. They are very amusing creatures, I must say. I find that gulls are probably just as funny as people a lot of the time. So I'm going to fill in the rest of this beach area and begin to make the beach come toward me. As you can see, I'm not using an enormous brush to cover an enormous space. I'm using a small brush with deliberate strokes. There is a painterly quality about this technique of doing it. It may take a little bit more time. It is not flashy and showy, and it is not a trick. It's painting, as I understand painting to be, a deliberate process that doesn't rely on shortcuts or some misconceived idea that there is magic in it. There is not magic in it. There is effort and inspiration and observation and, hard work. So, but there's probably nothing quite as, lasting as the experience that you have when you're out there doing this and trying to actually be a fine arts painter dealing with landscape. Here is where my the growth of this green is going to be. My background for it has been prepared, and I'm going to put it in as I go forward. Introduce the colors that go forward with it. This seems to be, according to my sketch, a pale green, probably a newer growth in the dunes, and put in a very interpretive way. Nothing fussy, just the information that here something green is growing. I'm not attempting to identify it as any particular kind of growth. We know that these are sand dunes with grasses on it. I don't know what this is down here. It could be the beginning of a little colony of beach plums, although that's a little far down on the beach for that. Maybe it's just another bunch of grasses, beach grasses. It's possible. I do not recall. I did not take verbal notes about this. All I did was to bring the sketch back. Well, because I'm working towards the foreground, I'm now going to take this very small brush, and I'm going to, this is an even smaller one. This is a number 2. Another Winsor Newton, very small brush used for details. As you can see, it's got tiny little bristles, but it's necessary because I'm going to do another human figure. This one is going to be, well, a combination of this Grumbacher color, which is called flesh. It doesn't have anything to do with it, but it's the right color for this, with a touch of the umber and a touch of, I believe it's called Indian red. And this figure is in motion. So you start with the head, the shoulders, the arm for motion, the body is at an angle, and the legs are in a walking position, which is usually a little upside down V. The more you make the V open, the quicker the person is walking. One doesn't spend a tremendous amount of time on these little figures, but they should be comprehensible. I think possibly I'd best put his bathing suit on. There we are. Just a suggestion. That's all we need. Oh well, he's a better figure than mine, so I better go back and do that a little bit better. My sketch is better than what I've done here in demonstration. This leg comes forward, and okay, that's probably better. Get this out. Yeah. So, and maybe a little small dark area for the suggestion of the head. Naturally, there is going to be a shadow cast by this figure, which I will just suggest only slightly with a few long lines. The sun obviously is coming from there, and there is the figure anchored to the beach by his shadow. Okay, in between here, there I've lost some of the paleness. There we are. Well, all of these details are small and maybe insignificant, but to me they're quite important because I'm attempting realism. Some grasses are growing here, which is going to be accommodated with this very small brush. As you can see, the brush needs to be small because the grasses can't be out of proportion. They can't be huge. They have to be in proportion with the rest of the painting. And with so if you were to do enormous blades of grass here, it would be unrealistic and therefore questionable to anybody who is viewing this. The gulls, of course, are all facing in the same direction, and I seem to have reduced them down to a small pattern. And I'm not going to do as many as I have on the sketch for the problem of time. But they're gray. The grayness of the head and the shape of the body is important to get. And that's all I'm going to show. And I'm going to put the white in to give you the feeling of what those birds are made of. They're in shadow. They're gray like this. They have a little swollen belly, and they can all be in the same pose because apparently they were when I was there that day. Okay, more paint. As you can see, the small brush is vital. Also, if a detail is well done, then the painting has a professional quality to it because, oh, artists are just such a pain. They always want it to be, realists want it to be plausible and understandable. There they are in the sketch. A little bit darker than what I'm doing, but I want to show you how I get to it. So now the little light sides of them are nothing more than nothing more than just a suggestion on one. Oops, not enough color, not enough paint. Here, when it gets like this, you can just apply the color like so, and somehow that ought to be convincing that these are little light-struck birds that are facing the water. And with more time, there's no question that all of these things take time. What I'm doing is merely demonstrating how you go about this. The details come later. As you can see, as soon as I clean my brush and make the yellow, the white more subtle, then the bird has a little bit more form to him. There's a piece there that's wrong. Well, anyway, so I'm going to kind of break for just a moment while I rinse my brush, and I'll be right back. So don't do anything important. I'll come back in a few seconds. Back again to finally see the end of this demonstration of the sketching of Smith Point Beach, a place which is accessible and available to all of us at the good time of the year, and even now if you're willing to brave the winds. But this is a composition that should take more time than what I've allowed it, but purely to show you how one goes about it is the only point of this. I do not pretend for a moment that one could do a painting in a half an hour. There are figures in my painting, and they are complex. Figures are something to be conjured with at all times. The only thing that I can do is to show you how I would go about the typical pose, and there were people there, and I was able to use them as models. But they also have to remember about proportion. These people are closer to you, therefore they're going to be bigger than the ones who are in the distance. And just another question of proportion. But the usual position of people at the beach is that of lying down and taking the sun. So upon observation, that's what I did with my small sketch. The business of putting people in a sketch should not intimidate somebody too badly. It does take some practice. I always find myself, worrying, can I really pull this off? But if you're out there, you'll find that it's a problem, and the problem is what makes it interesting to do. I think that when you have people on the beach, they assume the same position most of the time, and when they're sunning themselves, it's wonderful. They don't move. They are lying there prone and virtually just actually posing for a good deal of the time. Doing people should not be a deterrent. It should be an opportunity to practice. The lovely part is that people who go to the beach come with interesting colors, and when you find yourself fortunate enough to find a little group of people that are lying on brilliant towels and so on, you'll find that helps a great deal. I just wanted you there they are, with the legs bent and the bodies lying down. And yeah, keep that on the screen. I think I like to work from that. It's obvious that I watch them rather closely, and I will put a little aside in here that there are a number of times that I have done this. People have gotten up, come over to see what I'm doing. They've seen themselves painted lying on the beach, and they've bought the painting from me right then and there from the beach. And I must say that that's always been a very amusing part. It's happened to me a number of times. So I guess if anybody sees me painting out on the beach at Smith Point Beach, they can come over and see if I've captured them in states of relaxation and repose. I'm always glad when people come by to see me when I'm working out at the beach. So you know, these little details are not dealt with very often in these programs that you see. Usually people are eliminated because they are, well, it's a specialized thing. You have to be able to understand what is happening and what you're looking at. When I do my live show, I usually try to avoid people because we're usually shooting a scene out somewhere, and for some reason or another I pick remote places and there's nobody there to come and interrupt the scenery, unfortunately. I always very much like to have people come and interact with the landscape. So here's this lady. She has her arm at her side, but she's lying on a bright red, I think she's lying on a bright red towel. Anyway, we'll make it bright red in any case. So these are the things, and the parasols are also great. There were no parasols out this day, but I love to be able to see the equipment that people come with, and it's all very human, and that's what, you know, that's what makes it great fun. Anyway, the introduction of those little figures is probably all I want to do now, because the time is running out, and we've got to. I should try to get, for the most part, this finished and resolved and talked about once and for all. So the foreground is really nothing more than a recapitulation of what has been going on in the rest of the picture. You have to try to mix the same colors as you get towards the foreground, but if you don't, it's okay, because there are variables in everything. The color of the sand changes as it comes closer to the water, the color of the sand changes as it's up towards the dunes, and so forth. So it should be the general sort of same color scheme. But don't fuss with it too much, and for heaven's sakes, don't mix up a whole pile of sand color, because then you won't get anything really interesting going. So just mix it as you go along, and realize that the simpler sometimes these compositions, the better. The complexity with which some of the programs are showing you to paint the entire Rocky Mountain range, you know, is almost asking for people to be turned off by the business of painting landscapes, because it's too complex. Well, I'm coming maybe a little bit towards the end of this, and I'm going to put in one of these famous and very, very, very useful objects, namely the garbage cans. But they have a personality all their own. They are special. You don't find beach receptacles like this in Europe. They are strictly American, and I think they're strictly East Coast. So something as apparently dumb as a garbage can interests me enough to get it accurate. Probably because when I do beach scenes, I did a beach scene in Spain, and I'd like you to know that the garbage cans in Spain are nothing like this. Also, there are no birds left in Spain. They seem to have shot them all. Or the water is so polluted in the lower Costa del Sol that when you go there, the thing that you remark is that there are no birds singing and no birds sitting on the beach. Something of a shock to me. I found myself really furious with the fact that when I was sitting on the beach, I suddenly realized what was missing, and that was the bird activity. So, you know, we passed through here only once. We jolly well better take care of it, I expect. And when the weather permits, and if anybody out there is watching this and wants to start to do some painting, I hope that what I've done here has been of some use, even to the business of having the details of an American Long Island trash receptacle recorded purely for the accuracy of being the realist painter. So many times realist painters are ignored and gone by the wayside. That is obviously the shadow which links this to the ground. It is no longer floating in midair. So we have here just another few of the, just a few minutes to go, and a few details that are going to probably, let me show you how I would do some of the foreground details. I get down to it, I rest my hand on the easel here, and I try and get whatever it is that is interesting me here in the foreground, and it's something. But it's because you don't know what it is doesn't mean that you don't record it. It is obviously some things that have been washed up on, that wasn't intended, washed up on the beach. And I suppose that's one of the reasons that people who have my paintings find them so interesting, because they've experienced this. And as soon as you've experienced something, you feel more akin to it. Experiencing the particular qualities of the beaches on Long Island is something that probably everybody here has done at one time or another. There's another little lone figure back, but there's also some details here in the background that I'm going to do here with the this Indian red and black. I'm going to do it because it's up here and it needs to be as faithfully gotten from my sketch as possible. These are, as I remember, these are bushes that have been dried out, and what is left are just the darkened skeletons of them, just sort of up and down on the dunes. Whether or not they're attractive, it doesn't matter. They're part of the scene. And back here, there seems to be some things growing beyond this little mound here, and then all of these strange and amorphous, shapeless objects in the background. So go to these places as best you can. Take as little equipment as possible. I find that lugging heavy paints across a beach is rather tiring, so you can in fact have traveling paints by buying the smaller tubes, like these small tubes, which are less heavy to carry in large quantities as opposed to the great big ones, and then there are tubes that are even smaller than that. And I find that that's very important. I was in Corsica in October and found that carrying the paints was extremely tiring over mountainous and rocky territory. I'm going to sign this down here. Usually the signing is done in handwriting if possible. It takes some practice. It ought to be done. Don't print your name. Sign it in your handwriting as best you can. Sign it on wet canvas. It must be wet canvas, otherwise it won't marry with the color and it'll come off if anybody ever cleans the painting. So let the signature paint marry with the canvas and become part of the picture. That means that in 400 years, when this picture is dirty enough to be cleaned, somebody will clean it, but the signature won't go away. It's also a good idea to date it. You don't have to put 19, because obviously we're still in the 20th century, so 90 is what I'm going to put on here. Just a 90 with a little apostrophe. And that served the purpose very well for most of the classic painters. And don't forget, I think I mentioned it the last time, one of the most remarkable American painters is Frederick Church, with a new exhibition, a retrospective at the National Gallery in Washington, D.C., which I saw last week, and it is remarkable. So if you find yourself down there in our nation's capital, go and see Frederick Church. This is Patricia Windrow speaking to you from the Cable Easel, Cable Vision, Suffolk, Channel 6. Thanks for watching. Tune in the next time. Bye-bye.